दोस्तों, 26 साल की यात्रा को 6 मिनट में समेटना बहुत मुश्किल है जाहिर तौर पर। लेकिन ये कमलेश जी की ही क्षमता है कि वो ऐसा कर पाते हैं। और इससे ज़्यादा कभी वो समय नहीं लेते। लेकिन इससे कम एक जो भी संगमन से नए साथी जुड़ रहे हैं श्रोता के रूप में या पार्टिसिपेट के रूप में, उनके सामने पूरा एक चित्र आ जाता है कि किस तरह के आयोजन की सहभागिता करने के लिए आज हम यहाँ इकट्ठा हुए हैं। जाहिर तौर पर जैसा कि कहा भी जा रहा था कि 25वां संगमन जो था उसके बाद लगा कि थकान हो रही है, अब शायद ना होगा। और जब जब ऐसा लगता रहा है कि अब थक गए हैं, उसके बाद जो अगला संगमन और थोड़ा सा बेहतर होकर के और ज्यादा, जैसे थकान के बाद एक ताजगी आती है, लगभग उस अंदाज में संगमन होता रहा है। और इस बार का आयोजन भी इसका उदाहरण है, क्योंकि इसमें जैसा कि कहा गया कि चंदन पांडे की पूरी ऊर्जा, रचनात्मक और शारीरिक दोनों ऊर्जा लगी है। और प्रियंवत जी परिकल्पक तो हैं ही, उनकी उपस्थिति के कारण ये आयोजन बेहतर हो पाता है। और हर बार कुछ ऐसा हासिल होता है जैसे इस बार भी होने जा रहा है। इस बार का जो विषय है, मेरी रचनात्मकता मेरे द्वंद्व, यह विषय ही अपने आप में महत्वपूर्ण है। क्योंकि इससे पहले अक्सर होता था कि एक विषय था और जिसमें कला या साहित्य या संस्कृति की या राजनीति की दुनिया में काम करने वाले या सोचने समझने वाले लोग उस पर्टिकुलर विषय पर अपनी राय रखते थे। लेकिन इस बार बाहर का कोई विषय नहीं है, इस बार अपने भीतर का विषय है। यानी इस बार यह विषय आमंत्रित करता है कि लेखक और पाठक या कलाकार और श्रोता या भावक दोनों उस अंतर्मन की गहराइयों को झांकने की कोशिश करें, जिस पर बातचीत अब लगभग लगभग बंद है। अपने मैं को छोड़ करके दुनिया पर बातचीत करना अपेक्षाकृत आसान है, लेकिन अपने मैं के कोने अंतरे झांकना और ईमानदारी से उससे मुठभेड़ करना अपेक्षाकृत बहुत मुश्किल है। और यह रचनाकार करता है, कभी जताता है, कभी रूपांतरित होकर के उसकी कला में, उसकी रचना में आती है, और कभी नहीं भी आती है। लेकिन यह विषय है, ऐसा है कि अपने आत्म को किनारे रख करके इस विषय के साथ न्याय नहीं किया जा सकता। और दूसरी बात कि इस विषय पर अपनी राय रखने वाले लोग केवल लिखने की दुनिया से नहीं है। जैसे आज का जो एक तरह से बीज वक्तव्य होना है के.एस. राधाकृष्णन जी का, आप जानते हैं कि देश के बहुत महत्वपूर्ण, देश ही नहीं बल्कि मैं कहूँगा विश्व के बहुत महत्वपूर्ण शिल्पकार हैं वे। 1974 से शांति निकेतन इनकी कर्मभूमि है और इनके गुरुओं में रामकिंकर बैज, सोमनाथ होरे और सरबती राय चौधरी जैसे महान लोग हैं और उनकी मूर्तियां विश्वविख्यात हैं। तो एक कलाकार जिसने अपना जीवन, जिसने शिल्प रचते हुए अपना जीवन, अपनी आत्मा उस शिल्प में एक तरह से प्रतिभासित करने की कोशिश की है, वह यदि जब अपनी रचनात्मकता के बारे में बात करेगा तो जाहिर तौर पर एक कलाकार, संगीतकार या एक रचनाकार के लिए उनके इन अनुभवों से गुजरना, उसको सुनना एक बहुत अप्रतिम अनुभव होगा, इसका मुझे यकीन है। तो मैं बहुत आदर के साथ के.एस. राधाकृष्णन जी को मैं मंच पर आमंत्रित करता हूं अपनी बात रखने का। बीज वक्तव्य जैसा कुछ होता नहीं, लेकिन जो पहला वक्तव्य उसे हम बीज वक्तव्य ही माने, जो इस पूरे, जिसकी गूंज जो है 3 दिन लगातार होती है। तो मैं बहुत आदर और सम्मान के साथ आदरणीय राधाकृष्णन जी को आमंत्रित करता हूं अपनी बात रखने के लिए।
Sangaman and the authorities who started to initiate the whole process. It's fantastic to know that it has been happening from 1993 onwards. Because most of the organization, it's easy to make it, but to continue to be happening for the years, which itself is a very big task. Unless you are all committed, it doesn't happen. That's what I know, because I myself have a foundation, and it was started sometime 12 years back. And the kind of time that we go through, even during the COVID time and all, most of these institutions which were being made all came to a kind of a standstill for the reason of not able to move forward. So I can understand what all goes through into the making of an institution, making of an organization with different minds, especially with artists and writers. It's a tough task. You know, when I was sitting and listening to people speaking in Hindi, I was just thinking, why can't I speak Hindi also? Same feeling I had. But unfortunately, um, I don't know why I couldn't pick up. But when I came to Shantiniketan at the age of 18, it was much easier for me to pick up Bangla. In the sense that, one is that, here they really say in the university that it's the medium of instruction is English, but it always works with Bangla. I remember there was a professor here long back. He was teaching art history. And one of the students from Kerala, like me, one of the students stood up and said, well, sir, I can't understand anything. So he said, well, it's not my problem. It's your problem if you don't understand because you are here in Bengal and I'm going to teach you in Bengali language. Suppose you go to Japan, do you think they will speak your language? So you better think that you are in Japan, so you got to be really understanding. First you speak or learn the language to understand what you speak. Well, I was not told by any teacher, but in a natural process, I learned a bit of Bangla. But you know, after studying from here, after 8 years of my stay in Shantiniketan, I went to Delhi. It was 1981, and I'm there for last 44 years. But still not able to speak Hindi. It's a very, very stupid thing to think about it. Why can't I learn? But I can understand. I mean, clever enough to understand what you say. But I don't think that I can make it a point of view speaking in Hindi. Well, this morning I met Yashwantji and Priyam ji, who came to Tokarun and had an informal chat with them. I was telling them that, I don't know why am I chosen to be speaking here to start with. I think, I don't know how did Yashwantji know that what I have been going through in terms of dilemma in my own life. Probably he had some kind of hint that I should be the right person to talk about it. I think speaking about dilemma itself is one. It's not an easy thing to really talk about it because we all have it. It's that everyone in this seated here before me do go through that kind of a tough dilemma in your own, whichever way, in your thought process, in your all the decision making process. I can understand that even when I'm sitting here, even talking about itself is a dilemma. Now, Yashwanti was asking me, well, how long are you going to speak? I said that itself is a dilemma for me. How much I can speak, because there is no end to it, because there is no beginning of it. For the reason that, this has been happening. I mean, I really have to naturally talk about my certain experiences and the kind of difficult times that I have gone through. As a young child, I spent in Kerala in one of the villages, and I went to the school like anybody else. But soon after the school, I was thinking, well, what do you do? I mean, it's so natural that you are being sent to a college because my parents were teachers and they really wanted me to take up studies further. And so I was thinking what to study. I go to the university then because after class 10, it's a university in in Kerala. So what to learn, what to take up? I took up mathematics, chemistry, and physics. I thought maybe that's easier and interesting. Let me explore it. After doing that for a few years, I understood that's not my subject. Then I took up for my graduation economics and political science and history. I took up. That too, a year completed. I got so bored of it. So what is that? But I used to draw. That was the only good thing that has happened because one of my uncle was a painter who followed Ravi Verma school with the realistic paintings that he used to do. So I had the basic skill of, doing work, and many years, maybe 10 years of my experience working with him made me kind of decide that I should go to an art college. Then again, the dilemma was which college that you have to go to. That surface. So always you are in the process of going through the kind of choices and not decisions. And I applied in some places like any other students. And it was raining in Kerala. I think I had applied in Shantiniketan in the month of January. And in monsoon, heavy monsoon in Kerala, one of the postcards that had come in month of July, I looked at it, I saw it's Vishwabharati University. And the date was still clear, the interview date. Otherwise, everything is washed off. So with that postcard, I approached my father and somehow could manage to reach here to Bolpur station after a few days of journey in train. And luckily, I think so many people ask me, well, how did you land up in Shantiniketan? It's a very common question that I keep facing a lot. Being in Kerala, and there are many other colleges in Kerala itself, and Bombay and Madras and all that in Shantiniketan. Sincerely speaking, I don't know who brought me here, what brought me here. Landing here was one of the best times that I could see that it's going to happen. I didn't know anything about any teachers over here, but luckily we had Ram Kinkar Bej living in the campus. We had Somnath Hor and Sharbari Roy Chaudhary, the great sculptor. They were all here around. So, and for whatever reasons, for the kind of the way I really talked to them, or the way they noticed me having certain curiosity about, to knowing things about fields of art. So in the 3 years of this art learning, many people decide after 2 years what to do, whether you want to be a painter or because I came from Kerala to be a painter. But here, I don't see any chance of becoming a painter because I met with Somnath Hor and Sharbari, and they are the sculptors and printmakers. So I left to them to decide for me. And I'm glad that they asked me to be a sculptor. I started taking clay and work. So it's a thing that you don't know about. It's a field that you don't know much about it, but you are taking chance. It's all because of the teachers that you decide the subject, not what you are able to do or not. Because if you find some of the best teachers, you get to learn from them a lot more. Because the teachers here, the teaching method was so natural, but they never taught much. Naturally, learning process was there in Shantiniketan. It was very beautiful, straight from nature, straight from life, that you could draw from. You could really get your own experience built up. Sorry for my sore throat. Yeah, so meeting with these people and the kind of, I am seeing the subject when you really again talk about, because meeting with these great masters. Ram Kinkar comes to sculpture department and he practices because he was probably 68 years old. Somnath Hor was 51 and Sharbari was 41-year-old and I was 18. So what I'm trying to say, the teaching method was extremely, open to your own ideas. You can go anywhere. Because Shantiniketan is one of the universities that doesn't have any periphery as such. It's not like JNU that you get into the gate, you get out of that gate. Where does it start? Where does it end? We don't know. Some of the vice chancellors had come here. They tried to make a boundary for the university. They all failed. They all wanted to have some walls to come up, but it never happened. Still, anybody can enter the university whatever way that you can, because there was it's all open to villages and forest and paddy field and everything. There was a university and a little bit of an ashram belt that was there. So it was a very beautiful atmosphere. And it's still, I would say, there is. Well, things changes. Some of the dilemma that the artists, some of the masters that they faced, I can talk about. And the people, as students, we faced. It has always been happening to everybody. Ramkinkar Bey had, done some of the best sculptures in this campus in Shantiniketan Kala Bhavan. When you go to the Kala Bhavan, that you can see the Santal family. That was done in 1932. Sorry, 1938. Ramkinkar was only 32 years old when he did the sculpture. It's one of the most significant monumental sculpture which was done in concrete. And definitely because those years to make something other than concrete was so difficult for the artists. So they choose local materials and explore it. So this Ramkinkar did Santal family to start with, and then you would see Milkor, and the Buddha and the Sujata, and then you would see a sculpture called the Harvester. The Harvester, it's a woman symmetrically being placed, and she's holding the paddy, and basically sort of the harvesting that thrasher, as a thrasher that she's, the action of that is what you see in the sculpture. And the sculpture was positioned in such a manner that the maker, definitely the sculptor, had thought about it. He must have had the permission from the other masters and authorities. But one of the vice chancellor who came here decided that this sculpture should be removed. So that's a very, very wrong decision. But none of the artists protested it. The sculptor himself was sort of shocked to know that how my sculpture is such a monumental big sculpture is going to be removed from the actual location where it's made, because the sculpture is made of concrete. You cannot remove a concrete sculpture from one place to the other. And it was broken. But the sculpture was conceived in such a manner that the figure had no head, There are 2 arms, 2 legs, and there was no head. So Ramkinkar was asked, well, why is there's no head to that sculpture? So he explained, she's an unknown political prisoner. That's what was his answer to that. So this unknown political prisoner to be treated in vice chancellor decides to remove that sculpture from that location to somebody else, some other place. I was not a student then here. I heard about it because I was working directly under Ramkinkar, and I used to get a lot of old stories of how things were, and for all these artists were always talked about their own dilemma to the students because they are seeing the students' dilemma and a sharing kind of a space that they all shared it, So Ramkinkar cried when he saw the sculpture being removed from one location to the other, where it was broken. So then the vice chancellor's reply was that the head, je sculpture tar kono matha mundu nahi. Sheta abar phengece bole abar kanche. The one that had no head and tail is broken and the sculptor is crying for it. That's a very, very... So what happens? Whether you may be a vice chancellor, you may be anybody. Maybe you are a person who is working as a peon and helping you to be for a sculptor. But the sensibilities is something that doesn't come in through any syllabus. It has to come from your own sensibilities. You have to have it. So that practice of this powerhood, the power that you enjoy as a vice chancellor, that kept continuing for many, many years. Am I right? Because what happens is that today I am seeing it with many of the education institutions, many of the colleges and many of the institutions of cultural institutions. They are all having the head, it's headed by people who are not very sensitive. What is most important, I was talking to Yashwantji, sensibility doesn't come, it's not available anywhere. You really have to cultivate it. You really have to get to sense to it. So I think the whole exercise of all this Sangaman and everything is, I really would say it's all for making oneself sensitive enough to others. People should be extremely having a kind of a cordial, sensible relationship. That's all what one can hope for. Now, and I really was so much inspired of these sculptures by Ramkinkar, who made these monumental sculptures. And then I left after completion of my studies. I went to Delhi on a fellowship. There, I was working in a government studio, and having any chance to work on a public sculpture, I have always jumped on this idea because I remember Ramnivas Mirtha, who was the minister of, long back. He was the minister in, I think, information and broadcasting, and very sensitive, to art. He became the chairman of the academy, Red Kala Academy, and he proposed that Radhakrishnan, there is a proposal of a sculpture to be made in Bikaner. I said, oh, that's fantastic. I never asked for money or anything. The very idea of doing a sculpture for the public was extremely appealing for me. I took up the job. I went to Bikaner, looked at the site, and I started planning and making the sculpture over there. The sculpture is complete. On the highway of Jaisalmer Highway and in Bikaner, on the site, sculpture is complete, and the person who commissioned, who was working with me, was the district collector. So he came to me, Mr. Meena, his name was, and looked at my sculpture and asked me, so, Radhakrishnan, the sculpture must be inside this? And I said, well, what do you mean? No, because this is the mold, I can see it. So from the mold, you normally take it out. I said, no, I'm sorry, this is the sculpture. Yeah, because he thought the sculpture would have some kind of a figure coming out of it. And that figure will be pouring water from, this and that, and all kinds of an imagination that he had. And unfortunately, what I made was something extreme opposite to what he felt. So he told me, Radhakrishnan, if this is the sculpture, I'm going to get a punishment transfer. So you better, and also public also may criticize you, better run away from here. I asked, well, what is it? I wanted to explain to the public what I have done. That scope, there's no scope to that. So the kind of tough time that a sculptor faces, the kind of, because when we are talking about the very dilemma that you have when you are really practicing in your own creativity, which I'm sure being a writer, being a musician, anybody who is that, they all go through that kind of a dilemma. And again, more and more hundreds of examples of what a sculptor goes through. Equally, like I'm sure, because a painter wants to exhibit, a writer wants to publish, a sculptor wants to have naturally something in public, because everybody wants their art to be really reaching out to the public. That's very, very expected thing by the creator. So I have been thinking about many sculptures that has been happening, because in India, I found the kind of things that I have been doing that there was no taker for it, sincerely speaking. So obviously you continue to do something, you want to do some sculptures in different scale. So I decided to go to Europe. I think any kind of an opening that came to me took me to Paris, and I started working from Paris. Maybe it was easy because there is an existing audience. And maybe I could manage to do many sculptures over there, and I had some serious exhibitions and all that. But my mind was that when will I have a chance to do a sculpture of my choice, to do it in Delhi or any part of the country, which is not happening. Sincerely speaking, it was one of the biggest dilemma, because earning money and working in Europe was not what I wanted. I wanted more and more work to be happening in this country, wherever it is. 1906, Ramkinkar was born. 2006, it was his centenary year. I was invited by the Vishwabharati University, especially the art faculty, to come and do a sculpture here. I was very pleased. Oh, well, at least they have asked me to come at least once. So I came here and I made one sculpture in the Kalabhavan campus itself. While making the sculpture, I was just thinking that there's no bronze sculptures because I work with bronze. No bronze sculptures are here in Shantiniketan in the open air. Every sculpture which are done in bronze, it's always kept in a kind of a very, strong security sites. But in open air, I am putting up a big bronze, and many people want me. Listen, if you put a figure below, it will be filled with many people because people are not going to be very sensitive because it's a place where things may get stolen. And but I thought, whatever it is, I wanted to. So I conceived such a kind of a sculpture that this figure is kept much above where people cannot have access to it. Nobody can touch that sculpture. Maybe that was the right decision. And so the subject was like a terrafly that is kept above and taking a kind of a survey of what's happening on the ground. The sculpture is when you go to Kalabhavan, I'm sure tomorrow or day after, you can see the sculpture, it is kept there. And so I kept doing many, many airbound sculptures so that people cannot reach to the figure because the figures, once they really are hanging onto the figures and all, it might get spoiled. So my sculpture naturally took a turn where my sculptures are kept to be much above the ground. It's much above the ground. Nobody can touch it. But am I not restricting myself in doing the whole process? I want my sculptures to be on the ground where people come and touch it, but not destroy it. So that was the time that I was looking for it. In 2012, I was asked by Kerala government, because being a Keralite, they always wanted me to go back to the state, at least to do some work, because I have installed many sculptures many places in the world, and even doing a little bit of work in Delhi. In Delhi also, I don't know whether you have seen when you entered India Habitat Center, there are 2 sculptures on both the sides in the water body. That was done in 1990. So they asked me, well, why don't you come and do a sculpture in Kerala? I said, I will be very happy to do it, but provided I should choose the site. Because if they ask me to do somewhere where there are no people, it's no meaning. Because art has to be installed, art has to be seen by the public and to be shared by the public. Now I can see one of my sculptures here. I mean, when I'm seeing with the people around, I enjoy the whole process of seeing it. When I'm seeing a sculpture, where there's nobody, people are not really sharing the time, then it's not really a successful thing. So in Calicut, it's a very beautiful city, and for the first time I went to Calicut looking for a site. And Calicut is a very political district. It has Muslim League, it has CPM, and it has Congress, and very highly, extremely politically conscious space. And I know that I'm going to face tremendous criticism while choosing the site. But I chose a beautiful site in the middle of the ground, middle of the Calicut ground. I went to see what's the possibility of installing a sculpture over there. This was the ground. What is seen on the screen is the ground that I went to look at it. But the moment I said, I'm going to do a sculpture here, public came to know. Then there are a lot of issues. Well, how can you, it's beautiful grass, ground. We are almost 300 to 500 people are coming and spending day there. And how can you come and spoil this ground? I said, installing a sculpture doesn't spoil the ground. But to convince them, it was a very tough task. So I called the Politburo, Prakash Karat and people in Delhi. Amitabh Kant was also once the collector over there. So I also talked to everybody, listen, if I'm asked to do a sculpture, I prefer to do it here. I have no choice. And you have no choice also. I mean, the way I really put it across, that they said, please go ahead. do it, whatever resistance that you have. Do a sculpture there. And the next was I went and I started making some measurements and digging the grass. Some calculations and, cutting grass and all. People were really again coming out in objection, but nobody came close to me. And next, when I saw that I made a big hole because you have to naturally grout the whole entire concrete and then take it up the structure. It's like more like creating a kind of a huge structure because the sculpture is going to be public. And public sculpture, I have two medium. One is the bronze, one is the granite. So the granite will be placed on the concrete. So I'm making the structure here. So objections started coming. And then I really found that I may be in trouble because they wanted to stop me making a sculpture over there. So I went to the police commissioner. I said, listen, I cannot work unless I feel secured. It's very impossible. Cannot really do that. They said, well, we'll give you police security. Please go ahead. Nobody will come to disturb you in the ground. And also he suggested maybe it's a good idea that you work in the night. If you can work through the night and you sleep in the day, that's what was his choice. So I was trying to putting armature and putting concrete into that, making base. Then I decided to work in the night, middle of the night. I start from 11 o'clock. Most of the Mallus, Malayalis, they all go and sleep. By 10:30, you know that it's all khali. And I could manage to start working on it. The sculpture is huge blocks of granite stones. And that was coming to the site. And with the crane and the truck and all, the sculpture was being brought to that site. So by 5 o'clock in the morning, my installation is complete. And I was sitting in the corner of the ground to see how people are going to react it. Because it's already spoiled. A lot of crane, truck and everything has come. And next day morning, I could see people are coming from all over. All the corners, people are coming and looking at the sculpture. I was just thinking, what is the kind of first thing that they are going to do? How are they going to accept it or they are going to reject it? But it was so beautiful to see that they started taking selfie. Taking selfie at a site, which means they accepted it. Yeah, that's the ultimatum. If you're really having somebody you want to take a selfie with, means you are the beginning of flirting with that. So it was a fantastic experience for me to have a sculpture being accepted with a lot of resistance that was there in the beginning to start with. And then I could see hundreds of people are now coming and sitting around this sculpture, which is extremely satisfying. And they are really, it's huge granite blocks. And the sculpture on the top, that figure is the 10 feet, that sculpture, and that is around 800 kilos of bronze. That's a huge sculpture. We can see the kind of time that they are spending with the sculptures, but whether they mix their own comment. I go there sometimes to hear what they are talking about it also. So the sculpture is in Calicut for all the time to come, I suppose. Once in Kerala, I was sort of going through and I saw this Hindu newspaper where these people are standing on my sculpture and cleaning it. I mean, that was more than satisfying for one to understand that public made it for themselves. How to accept a sculpture and making it for themselves. Then I was invited by Mr. Parikar, who was the Chief Minister of Goa, asked me if I could do something for Goa city, Panjim city, and I was doing something on the promenade next to Mandavi River. I was installing this sculpture, which is almost like a gate, because that building itself is bronze. And it's almost like, somebody receiving to the floating population of Goa. And next to the river, it is being installed. But it's a home for many dogs and things like that, you can see. And it's a monumental sculpture that is there. That's almost like, witnessing the people who are coming into the state. Anything, any sculpture that you place, it really gets sort of mingled with it becomes in a kind of a permanent fixture, permanent part of the whole living process. And when I was installing sculptures in Europe, I found that this is the south of France, where I found that the sculptures I could put it because very close to the people can touch it. I know that by nature there is a different kind of an attitude, an approach to how to handle a medium or a sculpture. You can see it against it's in the Provence, in south of France, when I was putting up large sculptures for institutions. And I kept, though I was working from Europe, I started working on monumental sculptures back in Jaipur. I started casting in my own foundry over there. Large bronzes are being made. And after my Kerala experience in Calicut, the chief minister asked me if I could do one more sculpture in my own hometown where I was born. I was very much willing to provide it. They gave me the site that I want. And that was getting installed in Kerala, in Kottayam, where I come from. Not that these people are all extremely sensitive to art or anything, but at least there are certain responsibilities to an artist also that, okay, there may not be great audience, they may not understand your art, but I would still put it up. For time to come, people might get themselves trained to look at it and feel the presence of it. That's the way you have to look at it. The sculpture is complete there, but it's taken care by Malayalam Manorama. There's a newspaper. They're taking care of the maintenance of the sculpture. There's me standing there, so you can understand how height I have put. No Malayali hand can touch my sculpture there. I mean, that's the way I really kept it, because I'm sure that they're very capable of reaching out to any height. Then I was invited by 2011, Tagore's 150th, Shantiniketan Vishwabharati University, the Vice Chancellor wrote me a letter asking me if I could donate a sculpture for Shantiniketan, not for Kala Bhavan, but Shantiniketan. I said, if I will donate a sculpture, that if you can keep it safely. That was the thing. So they said it is the house that you see behind is Tagore's home, Udayan. So in the courtyard of Udayan, they have offered me. I mean, I really felt it's absolutely prestigious and an important site for me to install a sculpture over there. So the sculpture was installed. Me and Sharbari Roy Chaudhary, my teacher, is standing next to it. We were looking at it. The subject of the sculpture was a woman who is an arrow and also is the bow, both. So who will take off? She doesn't need anybody to be sending her to wherever she wants to go, because she is both. She decides when to take off, where to take off, how to do it, all that. So that self-content, that highly empowered, a student who came out of the university was the subject for me to be making this idea. The sculpture is there in Uttarayan that you can see. Please, if you have time, I'm sure you would go to Uttarayan, the museum, Tagore's museum, and make it a point to see all his homes. There are 5 houses of Tagore, and because he was he had his own aesthetics in terms of architecture, in terms of spacings. So all lot of things that you really would find. Even there's a Shamali, there's a building, a Shamali, that was specially designed in mud with a few Ramkingar sculptures on the wall, you can see. And that was done for Gandhiji to come. So Gandhiji came and stayed in that house in Shamali. Why I'm showing this slide is because this is one of the world's most famous sculpture. It's called the Walking Man. In the world, if you really ask me, whose sculpture is the most expensive and most talked about sculpture, is somebody called Alberto Giacometti. And I don't know, is there any sculpture in this world which is more expensive than this piece? I mean, I don't think that even anything existing like that, because he is so powerful, he is highly talked about. Look at a girl who comes so close to that sculpture. One of the most rare experience it must be. Even I could go close to that to take photographs. There's no barrier. Nothing is getting broken. Nobody is mishandling it. And where do that sensibility come from? How do that? How did they get trained themselves? I'm showing this slide just for the reason that, how people can come so close to a sculpture. That is the dilemma that a sculptor really facing today, like me. Why can't I make a sculpture? It's there on the road. People can go and see it. But the moment if it's a Ganesh or something like that, maybe people would, look at it with a little kind of a respect and this thing. But why can't a modern art or modern artist create a sculpture that you have access to? That's a major issue. After so many years of my sculpting, of more than 50 years of my sculpting, I am facing this thing. And I don't know how I will wait for this time to come. Maybe I may not be around, but I want it to happen that a sculpture should be there for all of us to go and touch. Because when I was asked by Park Hotel Group to have an open air sculptures in Park Street in Calcutta, I did a sculpture and I wrote a big thing, please touch. Because everywhere you read the new thing, notice that please don't touch. Because by touching you see more. Because eyes has set restrictions. And what you don't see, you see more by touching. That's what we were taught. And I think it's true too. Again, Giacometti sculptures, people are going so close and taking photographs. He's one of the most rare, one of the strong sculptures of the country. Look at this. I went last visit to Japan. I was looking at some of the sculptures. I mean, you really have. This is sculptured by Bourdelle, Rodin's disciple, French. It's a sculptured by Osip Zadkin. Vincent Van Gogh is represented here. He goes with the sketches and things like that in a bronze. Look at the ground. It's on the ground. Everybody can go and see, look at it, the sculpture, on the ground. I mean, I'm sure most of you have traveled and have seen something like that. It's in Berlin. I could see the children are playing with the sculptures. This is in Oslo. People climb up and down and everything. There's no restrictions. I think that's what I wanted to happen. I'm hoping that there has to be a time where I can leave my bronzes on the ground. I want people to come and be with them. That's the kind of a thing that I'm hoping to have. Now, people ask me, well, what is it that you are longing to have it? Is this the huge sculptures to be installed, private, public funded sculptures, and the tourists are going only to see those sculptures. I'm just showing you some more slides just to get an idea about how people are coming in contact with the sculptures, because art for public and the public is for the art. A huge sculpture, the only restriction is that, well, people don't go inside, but still you can go and touch the sculptures. Look at the explanations that comes, directly sort of confronting and talking about it. Beautiful sights. Last summer I was in Copenhagen, where I was looking at this series of sculptures on the seashore. In a canteen, that you can see some very important sculptures like Henry Moore. Yeah. So I'm just, this is in Edinburgh. This just a few months back, I was there to look at the sculptures of public sculptures. Look at the landscaping done in one of the buildings in front. There's no plastic, there's nothing, nothing is thrown. So thing is that we clean our home, but we don't really care about the public space outside. How we can integrate outside space and internal space? I'm not talking about the physicality of the space. The outer space and the internal space, the human space inside, and the human's outside space, how it can be really kept in an order of your own way. with the same kind of a value. I think that's what is one of the most important big challenge that we have before us. A Henry Moore sculpture, I was watching so closely about it. People are sitting next to the board, everywhere is, look at the bus stop. There is somebody, receiving, people are going, incredible sculptures all over. I could see from distance, that in the Champs-Élysées, the outside, I was walking and I could see that there are some chairs and some sitting arrangement and a lady is sitting there. And I was just thinking, is it what? Is it meant for sitting? The chair? Yes, it was meant for sitting. People could come and sit on the chair. That was a bronze chair. Again, sculptures. I'm going to speak about these public spaces in the center that coming end of the month. I'll be talking about what is public space, what is private spaces, and how we can really. It was in Berlin again, when you're walking that you see a chapel, one of the church. You go inside, there's nothing else, just one Pietà that was there installed with the natural source. A modern sculpture in an old church. Yeah. Sculptures all over. This is something very unusual for me to know that I could see in Edinburgh on the middle of the road that I was walking. I could see a sculpture installed, a bust installed on the ground on the road. I mean, it's extremely unusual because we will put anybody on the top of that. You go and look at Sardar Patel's statue that you have to see it against only the sky. The people who are very much on the ground, they are all kept above. But this is an extremely unusual experience for me, confronting a piece of sculpture, piece of art, and you really look at it on the ground that you are standing next to. And if it is seen from distance, can you see there's nobody else? It's just that sculpture is there. And it's a sculpture by Anthony Gormley, who is a British sculptor. And this is one of the unusual experiences. And when will we be able to install a sculpture like that on the ground? And I think I would continue to live with this dilemma for the time to come, I'm sure. And one day, with such kind of special sessions and meetings and such organizations organizing and many sculptors coming and talking to people, one day it might be possible. So Sangaman, I really think you are doing a fantastic job. All of you are really, you're very much involved in the making of creating a sensitive world, and let there be one. Thank you so much.
धन्यवाद के.एस. राधाकृष्णन जी. एक बहुत ही अनूठे किस्म का ये वक्तव्य हम लोग सुन रहे थे और एक शिल्पकार के साथ नहीं बल्कि बहुत सारे शिल्पों के साथ भी, बहुत सारे शिल्प के साथ हम लोगों ने इस तरह का संवाद किया. वो जो अंतिम शिल्प था, मैंने जीवन में इतना अकेला शिल्प नहीं देखा जो सड़क के बीच में जो था. अद्भुत व्याख्यान था. लग तो रहा था कि ये एक कलाकार की एक सर्जनात्मक यात्रा के कुछ पड़ाव वो हमसे साझा कर रहे हैं, लेकिन बहुत सारे सूत्र इसमें ऐसे आए जो हमारे बहुत काम के, कला की दुनिया में या रचना की दुनिया में जो भी काम करने वाला है उसके लिए बहुत सारे सूत्र उभर कर सामने आते हैं. जैसे शुरुआत वाला ही जो राम किंकर बैज वाली बात कर रहे थे वो, कि जो संवेदनशीलता है उसको समझने के लिए एक अलग तरह की अंतरात्मा की ज़रूरत पड़ती है. किसी पोस्ट से या किसी पद से आप उसके करीब नहीं जा सकते हैं. या उनकी अपनी भी बात, जो जैसलमेर वाली बात वो कह रहे थे कि एक कलाकार और एक कलाकार जो जगहें चुनता है अपने लिए, उस जगहों का चुनाव, या जिसे हम कहते हैं कि जो मीडियम चुनता है, उस मीडियम और जो उसका भावक है उसके बीच की पारस्परिकता कहीं ना कहीं अवचेतन में काम करती है. और हम सब जो जितना भी अपने आप को सोचते समझते हैं अपने काम को लेकर के, उसके लिहाज से बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है. तो एक बहुत दिलचस्प और बिल्कुल अलग किस्म का था. एक ये केवल एक शिल्पकार की यात्रा नहीं है, बल्कि रचना की दुनिया में काम करने वाले हर मनुष्य के लिए एक अनूठे किस्म का व्याख्यान था. मैं पुनः संगमन की ओर से उनके प्रति हार्दिक आभार व्यक्त करता हूँ.